Would you ever recommend somebody just start in the New Testament? A lot of people just say read John. Just start reading John. That's a typical like advice for someone who's kind of interested in Christianity.
I think that's reasonable, but for a long time, people who read John and John himself assumed when he was writing his gospel that people had a certain level of familiarity with the Old Testament. John
Right.
was writing to fulfill questions that had already been raised in the minds of his readers by the Old Testament narrative they were already pretty familiar with. So I do think, and I say this as someone, by the way, who literally, the first time I really started digging into the Bible, I started with John's Gospel. But I do think, in retrospect, there is a kind of, yes, obviously I became a Christian, right? So I'm not saying never do that, but there is sort of a certain artificiality to it, and I think in some ways I might have been a bit better served by starting with, say, the Psalms or with First Samuel.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Like, I have been so helped by the Bible, by haphazard, like unorganized Bible reading for most of my life. But there is
That's
just
true.
something,
That's true. I mean, sometimes I'll open the Bible and I don't know where I'm going to turn, right? I know
right,
I want something to stimulate prayer, but I just, if I think as I'm opening it, should I go to Isaiah? Should I go to the Psalms?
right. And there's been seasons of my life where I just read the same thing over and over and over again, and it's fine. You can learn and be blessed in all of these different things. Like God's word truly is very unique in that way. There's not very many texts that hold up to that kind of crazy approach to it.
Yeah, that's right. I should say this about John. I mean, my favorite book of the Bible, and part of this is the book that convicts me the most overall, is the book of Daniel. And probably reading Daniel has done the most out of any single book I've read in the Bible to like really deeply convict me in the marrow of my bones of the truth of the central claims of the Bible. But I was only able to reach that point after I had a pretty robust background in lots of the rest of the Bible's material. And so I don't think I would ever suggest, unless it's a very specific person, that someone start the Bible by just jumping into Daniel. And I think maybe what happens with John sometimes is that because John is the favorite book of a lot of Christians who are very experienced in the Bible, people just assume, oh, go to John as your go-to point. You
Right.
could do worse than starting with John. I think starting with John is a lot better than starting by reading the entire Pentateuch, start to finish, including the law codes.